All right, let's talk Florida State Seminoles. Obviously, you FSU fans, you have reason to be pumped up, but what a statement. What a message. I tell you what, even the most optimistic Florida State fans, you probably were shocked to see what you saw at home. You talk about Norvell getting this team closer to the 2023 model with that performance. Castellanos backing up the talk, and now we're seeing even more great news out of the win. Massive momentum building in Tallahassee. We'll get to that story in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this Florida State Seminoles football team riding high after a dominating performance against the dynastic Alabama Crimson Tide. Obviously, it's not the same Nick Saban Bama squad as Castellanos, obviously very aptly. And, he had kind of a prophetic vision about it. Of course, going back to his June comments, worked out very well for him and for Florida State with a dominant performance at the line of scrimmage, quarterback play, every aspect of the game. Florida State was just better. And we're starting to see more good news roll in on the front of what it could mean for this team going forward. Let's pull up a tweet here, a post courtesy of the great Hayes Fawcett, and a fantastic recruiting reporter, talking about some recruiting news that's already benefiting Florida State. From the post, breaking class of 2026 wide receiver Jonah Winston has committed to Florida State. He tells me for at Rivals, the 5'10", 165-pound wide receiver from Hoover, Alabama, chose the Seminoles over Arkansas and Maryland. He's the younger brother of FSU legend and NFL quarterback Jameis Winston. So the timing of this really matters. The fact that it came after this big victory, it speaks to the momentum. Now, a lot of people will say, well, this is just Jameis's brother. Of course he's going to Florida State. That's not necessarily the case. The starting quarterback for Notre Dame, C.J. Carr, his dad and his grandfather was Michigan. They're Michigan men, and he goes to Notre Dame. Arch Manning, right, if you look at his two uncles, they went to Tennessee and Ole Miss. In fact, their two brothers, Peyton and Eli, went to two different SEC schools, bitter rivals. So just because someone's a brother doesn't mean they go to the same school, obviously. And that's exactly why this is Jonah Winston commitment is such a big deal. We're seeing actual, legitimate, real hardcore momentum on Florida State right now. And this goes back to the comments we made when it came to Castellanos back in June. We talked about the benefits of recruiting. The first step in persuasion is attention, right? You got to get attention on you. Castellanos brought all the eyeballs on Florida State. Alabama then said, hey, listen, we're going to deal with the disrespect. And guess what? Castellanos backed it up, and the entire recruiting world saw this. You talk about momentum building for this FSU football team. This is what we're talking about. In fact, I want to show up an interesting graphic right here. Let's pull up a map of the state of Alabama to highlight exactly why this is big. So you can see, again, we're talking about Winston from Hoover, Alabama. You can see how close Tuscaloosa is to Hoover, right? And now, obviously, Jonah Winston, right? The connection to Florida State, his brother is still part of it. I understand. But this is a guy who guaranteed lives in the middle of the state of Alabama. Tuscaloosa is like 80 miles away. There's Auburn there. There's Florida's not far away. Baton Rouge isn't far away. He's going to Florida State. Arkansas is pretty close. Why? Because the momentum and the energy is behind FSU right now. And that's what that victory did, guys. That victory completely reset the narrative. Florida State last year in 2024 was a debacle, was a dumpster fire. Florida State in 2025, they're edgy, they're fun, they're exciting, they're explosive, they're physically dominant, they're just better. We're talking an ACC team embarrassing an SEC team. Every single thing you could have wanted out of this outcome came to fruition for Florida State. In fact, let's go ahead and pull up some of the stats from the game. I just want to highlight how impressive this was, and I want to focus in. If we got the box score on the screen there, you can kind of sit there and see the first downs and some of the passing yards. Alabama has some advantages there, but in terms of passing yards, first downs are relatively close. But again, the important thing to remember there is that because Alabama was trailing a lot late, they were throwing the football a lot late, so you get a little bit extra inflated passing yards. But I want you guys to look at the rushing yards. This is what I'm talking about. This is an SEC versus ACC matchup. We're told the SEC is more physical. It's Alabama. Nick Saban's gone, but it's still the Tide. Florida State outrushed them 230 to 87. You talk about a dominant performance, guys. This is exactly what you're talking about. This is the kind of game right here that every single recruit, every single transfer, every single potential Florida State Seminole saw Florida State go out and dominate, and they said, that's where I want to go, right? 2024, it's distant memory. It's like it never happened. The only thing right now with this Florida State squad is this dominant performance against Alabama and this Jonah Winston commitment, the timing of it almost immediately after the game. I think that's just the first shoe to drop. We're going to see Norvell and this program build more and more momentum. We're going to see recruits. We're going to see transfers. And, folks, we're going to see a lot of wins. Again, I don't want to overreact too much to one game, but I think the message sent by the Florida State Seminoles was absolutely outstanding. The future is a whole lot brighter. Castellanos looks like a great great addition. Norvell's done a great job. Malzahn across the board. Phenomenal work by the Seminoles. Again, I think the trajectory of this team, it was up in debate a few days ago. Now it's 100% in the positive direction. Future very bright in Tallahassee. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Florida State fans, in the comment section below, give us the one player from that dominant performance last weekend that really surprised you, a guy that you weren't really expecting to have a really big game, but really played well. Maybe it's Castellanos. Maybe it's someone on the defense, right? Give us just one guy, a guy who really stood out to you as sort of a surprising impact player. Put him in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you now. What are your thoughts on the Florida State's win, the future of this team, recruiting, just everything going on with the Seminoles right now?
Yeah, I think this commitment, I think this win for Florida State, I think this new attitude, everything that is brought up from what has gone on this past weekend for the Seminoles is very reminiscent to another team who, unfortunately, they didn't get the win this weekend, but I think the point still stands nonetheless, and that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Is when they were able to make it to the national championship game last season, we saw a big spike in recruiting for the Fighting Irish. Obviously, this is a team, this number 3 ranked recruiting class in 2026 so far. So for their good play all season long, there's a lot of excitement with the program once they made it to the national championship game. Unfortunately, weren't able to get a win there, but this is a team that really used that to help the recruitment game and get a lot of great players committed to Notre Dame. I think this is although this is just one game, first game of the season, I think it's going to have a very similar effect to that of what happened to Notre Dame. I think the whole narrative just, Florida State, a terrible team last year, lost a lot of games, a lot of close games even as well, but it's just a team who did not look good last season. In comes this transfer quarterback. He's acting cocky, he's saying, hey, Nick Saban can't save you anymore. This isn't, the same Alabama team. We're not afraid of them. We're going to come out and, basically punch them in the mouth. And to back it up and really just absolutely dominate the Crimson Tide, 31-17, the score looked really bad. This was just an absolute manhandling by the Florida State Seminoles of Alabama. I think it looks really good, and I think it's going to really just shoot up recruiting rankings. Obviously, we see guys starting to commit early on, but people are going to want to be a part of this team. Whether they go on to go win a national championship this year or something like that, that's besides the point. That's not the point here. The point is there's a ton of momentum as far as the new wave of Florida State. Like you said, the 2024, that's an afterthought. No one's really even thinking about that season anymore. Everyone's saying, hey, we remember what Florida State could be. We're seeing this team make some good strides. There's a lot of good stuff going on. And I think that we're going to see some massive gains in recruiting over the next weeks and months, just purely because they were able to back up what they said, and Tommy Castellanos and this new Florida State squad really just brings a lot of moxie onto the field, and recruits, they're going to love that stuff.
Yeah, and especially considering the next few games for Florida State, right? One of the benefits, you have a statement victory like this, next couple games, a little bit lighter schedule, of course, before you get prepared for the big matchup against the Miami Hurricanes, who got that big win over Notre Dame, like you alluded to. This gives the Florida State Seminoles another month to just build on that recruiting momentum, get things figured out, solve some things. Don't want to overlook any opponents, of course. You still got to go out and execute, but I think there's a great chance they head into that matchup against Miami, 2 top 10 teams looking like contentions, maybe top of the ACC involved. We've already seen Clemson fall to LSU, right? There's a lot of drama building in the ACC. It's one game. I know no one wants to overreact too much, but boy, with that kind of statement and that kind of momentum and this kind of juice, it's hard not to look at this Florida State team as a serious contender in the ACC, maybe even to make it to the postseason, right? This is an absolutely great start for Florida State. Love to see the recruiting momentum. There's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of energy, a lot of juice, and even more great news on the Tallahassee in the coming days and weeks. Give a lot of credit to Norvell, give a lot of credit to the players. In one game, in just one 3-hour window, the narrative has flipped completely. Guys, that's the world of college football. Great job to Florida State for getting it done.